I still remember the sound of my playlist disappearing. Not the click of the delete button, I wasn't there for that, but the silence that replaced it. The absence of something I'd spent 3 years building, song by song, memory by memory, late night by late night when the world felt too loud and music was the only thing that made sense. I was standing in the doorway of our shared apartment when Emma told me. My sister, my twin, though you'd never know it from how differently our parents looked at us. She was scrolling through her phone, legs crossed on the leather couch Dad bought her for her birthday, the one I'd gotten a gift card to a bookstore for mine. "Oh," she said, not looking up. "I deleted that weird playlist of yours. Needed the space for the party music." I stood there holding my laptop bag. The strap was digging into my shoulder, but I couldn't move. "Which playlist?" "The one that was like 1,000,000 songs. Olivia's archive, or whatever pretentious thing you called it." She waved her hand dismissively. "Don't worry, I uploaded all the good party stuff. Tonight's going to be perfect." My playlist, 3 years of discovery. Songs I'd found at 2 a.m. when I couldn't sleep. Tracks from artists nobody had heard of yet. Pieces of music that felt like they'd been written specifically for moments in my life. The night I realised I wanted to study music theory. The afternoon I finished my thesis. The morning after my first gallery showing of sound installations flopped, and I needed to remember why I'd started. "That was my Spotify account," I said quietly. "Yeah, but you never use it for anything fun. Just all that experimental noise stuff." She finally looked up, smiled that bright Emma smile that made everyone forgive her for everything. "You can rebuild it after the party. I'm sure you remember most of them anyway. You're good at that stuff." I was good at that stuff. Good at remembering, good at cataloguing, good at being in the background while Emma shone, good at not making waves while she made entrances, good at being the complicated one, the difficult one, the one who took things too seriously while she was the easy one, the fun one, the one everyone wanted at their parties. This party was supposed to be for both of us. Our 25th birthday. But somewhere in the planning it had become Emma's party, in Emma's favourite restaurant that I was allergic to half the menu at, with Emma's friends and Emma's music and my silence. "Emma, that wasn't just a playlist. That was..." "Don't be dramatic, Liv. It's music. I'll help you find new songs after tonight, okay? Better ones. Ones people actually want to hear." She was already looking back at her phone. "Mum's bringing that photographer she knows. Wear something nice. Not black." I wore black anyway. I always wore black. Emma wore silver, something sparkly and perfect that caught every light in the room. The party was exactly what she wanted, loud and bright and full of people who knew her name and looked past me to find her. I stood near the bar, drinking water because someone had to drive home, listening to the playlist she'd created. Top 40 hits, songs everyone knew, music that filled space without meaning anything, that made people dance without making them feel. Every track was a reminder of what was gone. Someone bumped into me, apologised without looking at my face, moved on. I checked my phone. No notifications, no messages. Not from our parents, who were across the room taking photos of Emma. Not from Daniel, my boyfriend of 2 years, who was laughing at something Emma said, his hand on her shoulder in that casual way he had, the way that used to feel affectionate and now just felt absent. I watched him watch her. I'd been watching for months, actually, maybe longer. The way his attention shifted when she entered a room. The way he asked about her before asking about me. The way he'd suggested last week that maybe I should be more like Emma about things, more spontaneous, more fun, less intense. More like Emma meant less like yourself, but I hadn't said that out loud. The DJ Emma hired, her friend from college, someone who'd never spoken to me despite us being in the same program, was taking requests. I heard Emma's laugh, bright and crystalline, and turned to see Daniel leaning close to her, whispering something. She nodded, said something to the DJ, and suddenly a new song started. One of my songs, from my deleted playlist. A deep cut from an indie artist I discovered 2 years ago. A track that had never charted, that existed in the spaces between genres, that most people would skip because it took 30 seconds to build and you had to listen to understand it. I felt something crack inside my chest. Emma was dancing to it with Daniel. She'd taken my music and made it hers. She deleted my collection and then cherry-picked the pieces she wanted, the ones that would make her look interesting and eclectic and deep. She was performing my taste to an audience that would credit her with the discovery. Daniel spun her. She laughed. Nobody looked at me. I left through the side door. Nobody noticed. I walked to my car in the parking garage, sat in the driver's seat, and realized I was shaking. Not crying. I was past crying. Something quieter and more permanent was breaking inside me. I started the engine. I didn't remember making the decision to drive, but I was driving. Out of the garage, onto the street, through intersections that blurred together. I wasn't going home. I wasn't going anywhere specific. I was just moving away from the party, the music, the sight of Daniel's hand on Emma's shoulder, the sound of my song playing for people who didn't know it was mine. The light ahead was red. I knew it was red. I saw the colour, registered it somewhere in the distant part of my brain that was still functioning. But I didn't stop. My foot stayed on the gas. I was tired, so tired of stopping, of waiting, of being the one who followed rules while Emma broke them and got celebrated for it. The truck hit me from the side. I heard the impact before I felt it. A sound like the world ending metal and glass and physics. Then pain, sharp and immediate, and then nothing sharp at all. Just a spreading coldness and a strange, distant thought. This is what silence sounds like. I could hear the radio. My car's radio still playing somehow, a song I didn't recognise. Music that meant nothing. I wanted my playlist back. I wanted the songs that understood me, that spoke in the language I'd spent years learning, that made the world feel less impossible. The coldness spread. I stopped shaking. Everything was becoming very still, very quiet, very simple. No more parties I wasn't wanted at. No more watching Daniel look at Emma. No more being the difficult daughter, the complicated sister, the one who took everything too seriously. My last thought was a bitter, tired kind of peace. At least I don't have to rebuild the playlist. Then nothing. Then everything. I opened my eyes to my childhood bedroom ceiling. The poster of Radiohead's OK Computer album art. The string lights Emma and I hung together when we were 16 before everything became a competition I didn't know I was losing. The crack in the corner that looked like a river if you squinted. I was 14 again. I sat up slowly. My body felt different. Smaller, younger, without the accumulated tension of years spent shrinking myself. My phone was on the nightstand. An iPhone 6. I picked it up with hands that didn't shake and checked the date. March 15th, 11 years ago, 6 months before I started building my playlist. I stood up and walked to the mirror. 14-year-old me stared back. Same dark eyes, same serious expression that Mum always said made me look unfriendly. Same black t-shirt. I'd been consistent, at least. But now I was seeing this face with 11 years of memory behind it. 11 years of knowing exactly what came next. What mistakes to avoid. What people to believe. What warnings to hear. I knew what Emma would become. I knew what Daniel would do. I knew what our parents would choose. Again and again, every time there was a choice between supporting my complicated dreams and celebrating Emma's easy successes. And I knew, with perfect clarity, that I had been given something impossible, a chance to do it differently. I didn't waste time questioning it, didn't spiral into confusion or disbelief. I'd spent my first life overthinking everything, while Emma acted on instinct and won. This time, I would trust what I knew. I went downstairs. Mum was making breakfast. Emma was already at the table, scrolling through her Instagram. Less followers then, but still more than me. Dad was reading the news on his iPad. "Morning," I said. They looked up, surprised. I usually stayed in my room until the last possible moment, avoiding the family breakfast routine that felt like a performance I hadn't rehearsed for. "Morning, sweetie," Mum said, her smile cautious. "You're up early." "Couldn't sleep," I said. It was true, in a way. I'd died and been reborn. Sleep seemed less important than reclaiming my life. I ate breakfast in silence, listening to Emma talk about a party she was planning. Not our birthday party, that was 11 years away, but some smaller thing that felt just as much like it was swallowing all the oxygen in the room. Mum and Dad listened with full wow attention, asking questions, offering suggestions. I didn't interrupt, didn't try to compete for their attention. That was old Olivia's mistake, thinking that if I just spoke up, just shared my interests, just tried harder, they'd look at me the way they looked at Emma. Now I knew better. Their attention wasn't something I needed. I'd spent my whole first life hungry for it and starved anyway. After breakfast, I went back to my room and opened a new Spotify account, not on the family account Emma and I shared. That was her territory now, I understood. My own account, my own space, private. I started adding songs, everything I remembered from my original playlist, but also new choices. Songs I'd found too late the first time, artists I'd dismissed and later regretted. I built it methodically, carefully, with the patience of someone who knew exactly what she was building and why. I added the obscure Japanese ambient track I'd discovered at 19, the Brazilian jazz fusion piece I'd found at 22, the Scottish folk song that had made me cry at 23. I was building a timeline of my future past, a map to places I'd already been. By the end of the day, I had 200 songs. By the end of the week, 500. By the end of the month, 1,000. Emma noticed I was spending more time in my room, but she didn't ask why. In my first life, she'd been vaguely concerned, trying to pull me into her social orbit. This time, I didn't resist or accept. I simply existed in parallel to her, and she didn't know what to do with that. Neither did our parents. "Olivia's been quiet lately," I heard Mum say to Dad one evening. I was supposed to be upstairs, but I'd come down for water and stopped when I heard my name. "She's always quiet," Dad replied. "Yes, but it's different now. She seems, I don't know, so self-contained." "Is that bad?" "I don't know. Should we be worried?" "She's getting good grades. She's not in trouble. Maybe we should just let her be." Let her be. It was the most attention they'd ever paid to what I actually needed, and they said it like it was a failure of parenting rather than a gift. I went back upstairs with my water and added 5 more songs to my playlist. High school unfolded like a path I'd already walked. I knew which teachers would understand me and which wouldn't. I knew which friends were genuine and which were only close to me to get closer to Emma. I knew which opportunities to pursue and which would lead nowhere. I joined the music program, but I didn't make it my entire identity this time. I took the scholarship to the summer composition workshop. I started a blog about music theory that the first time around I'd been too afraid to start because what if nobody read it? What if people thought I was pretentious? What if I was wrong? This time I knew. Some people would think I was pretentious. I was right more often than I was wrong. And the people who read it, the small, dedicated audience that found me, they understood what I was saying in a way my family never would. The blog started small. I wrote about song structure, about why certain chord progressions made people feel certain ways, about the mathematics of rhythm and the poetry of noise. I posted twice a week, every week without fail. I didn't promote it. I just wrote, and slowly people found it. By sophomore year, I had 100 regular readers. By junior year, 500. By senior year, 2,000. They were scattered across the world, a music student in Berlin, a radio DJ in Portland, a retired teacher in Tokyo who'd always loved music, but never understood the theory behind it. They commented on my posts, shared them, started conversations. I'd built a community in the margins, a space where complexity was valued and attention was rewarded. Emma asked about it once, junior year. We were both home for dinner, a rare occurrence. She was talking about her social media following. She had 10,000 Instagram followers by then, pictures of her perfect life accumulating likes like currency. "What are you always listening to?" she asked during a lull in conversation. "Music," I said. "Well, obviously, what kind?" "All kinds." She laughed, that easy Emma laugh. "You're so weird, Liv. Can I hear?" "No," I said. Not mean, not angry, just factual. "It's personal." She looked surprised. Old Olivia would have handed over her headphones immediately, grateful for the attention. New Olivia knew better. Some things weren't meant to be shared with people who would consume them without understanding them. Mum frowned. "Olivia, your sister is just trying to take an interest." "I know," I said, "and I'm saying no." The word hung in the air. No. Such a small word, such a complete sentence. I'd said it so rarely in my first life that it had lost all meaning. Now it meant everything. Emma moved on. She always moved on. Dad changed the subject. Mum looked uncomfortable. I finished my dinner in peace. By the time I was 16, my playlist had 5,000 songs. By 18, 10,000. It was a living archive, a map of my interior landscape, a collection of sounds that made sense of the world. And I never shared it, not once. Not with Emma, not with my parents, not with anyone. College came. I applied to different schools than Emma, a choice that shocked our parents, who'd assumed we'd stay together like we'd always been. I chose a small liberal arts school with an exceptional music theory program in Massachusetts. Emma chose the state university with the best social scene, 3 hours away. "Are you sure?" Mum asked when the acceptance letters came. "Don't you want to stay with your sister?" "I'm sure," I said, "but you've never been apart." Exactly. Mum didn't understand, neither did Dad. Emma looked relieved, actually, though she tried to hide it. Maybe she was tired of being tethered to me too, tired of the constant comparison that went in her favour, but still existed. For the first time in my life, both lives, Emma and I had separate trajectories. And for the first time, I thrived. My college was small, intense, full of people who took music seriously, not as background noise or party fuel, but as language, as mathematics, as art. My professors took me seriously. My peers engaged with my ideas. Nobody knew Emma. Nobody compared us. I was just Olivia, and that was enough. I expanded my blog into a podcast during freshman year. Sound theory, I called it. Each episode, I'd break down a song, sometimes famous, usually obscure, and explain what made it work. The chord progressions, the production choices, the cultural context, the emotional mathematics of it all. The podcast grew faster than the blog had. Apparently, people wanted to understand music, not just consume it. By sophomore year, I had 10,000 subscribers. By junior year, 50,000. By senior year, 100,000. I started getting emails from musicians who said I'd helped them understand their own work, from listeners who said I'd changed how they heard the world, from professors who assigned my episodes in their classes, from a streaming service that wanted to hire me as a consultant. I was becoming someone, not in Emma's way, not loud, not visible, not performed, but real, substantial, someone who mattered to people who paid attention. I dated occasionally. There was James, a jazz pianist who understood the language of improvisation. There was Yuki, a sound engineer who could hear things in recordings that most people missed. There was Angela, a music journalist who challenged my ideas and made them sharper. None of them were serious. None of them needed to be. I was learning who I was without needing someone else to define me. And then, junior year, I saw Daniel at a party. He was visiting a friend at my school. We were at the same gathering, some crowded apartment where the music was too loud and the conversations too shallow. I recognized him immediately. Older now, but still him. Still the person who would, in another timeline, become my boyfriend and then fall in love with my sister, and never quite have the courage to admit it. He recognized me too. Olivia? He looked surprised. Emma's sister. Just Olivia, I said. Right. Sorry, you look different. Good, different. He tried to talk to me. Asked what I was studying, what I was doing here, whether I was still in touch with Emma. His attention was focused in that intense way he had, like he was really seeing me, really interested. It was the same attention that had made me fall for him the first time. The same attention I now recognized as performance, as the way he looked at everyone when he wanted something. Can I get your number? He asked. No thanks, I said and walked away. I heard through mutual friends that he asked about me after, that he'd seemed genuinely interested, that he'd been disappointed when someone told him I had a boyfriend. I didn't, but I wasn't about to correct the misunderstanding. Later that year, I heard he'd started dating Emma. They met at some event, hit it off immediately. She posted pictures. Daniel with his arm around her. Daniel at her parties. Daniel looking at her the way he'd looked at me when he wanted something. I felt nothing. No jealousy, no vindication, no satisfaction. They were two people I used to know, living a life I'd already left behind. My playlist grew to 20,000 songs. It was extensive, eclectic, impossible to categorize. I made it public finally junior year, not because I wanted attention, but because it seemed selfish to keep it private when it might help other people discover music they'd love. I didn't promote it, just changed the privacy settings and moved on. But people found it. My podcast listeners found it. Music bloggers found it. Other curators found it. It started showing up in best playlists articles. People called it comprehensive, eclectic, deeply personal. They called it a masterclass in curation. By senior year, my playlist had 100,000 followers. My podcast had 500,000 subscribers. I'd published articles in major music magazines. A small press wanted to publish my collected essays as a book. The streaming service I'd consulted for offered me a full-time position after graduation. I took the job, moved to New York, got a small apartment in Brooklyn with good acoustics, spent my days thinking about algorithms and human taste, about how to help people discover music that would matter to them, about the balance between the popular and the profound. Emma and I talked occasionally, obligatory texts on holidays, brief calls orchestrated by our mother. She'd graduated, moved back home, gotten a job in marketing at a local firm. She and Daniel had broken up. I didn't ask why, didn't care. She seemed fine. I seemed fine. We were fine, in the way that people who share DNA but not lives are fine. My parents were proud now, in their confused way. They'd tell their friends about my job, my podcast, my book. They didn't understand what I did. Mum still called it that music thing. But they understood that it was impressive, that other people were impressed, and that was enough for them. It wasn't enough for me, but I didn't need it to be. I'd learned that lesson thoroughly. Until our 25th birthday approached. Emma called me 3 months before. We hadn't spoken in 6 months. Hey, Liv, she said, and her voice had that forced casual tone that meant she wanted something. So, big 2-5 coming up. Yes, I said. I was thinking we should do something together, celebrate. Sure, I said, because old habits died hard, and saying no to Emma had never been easy, even now. I was thinking a big party, joint thing like we used to talk about. We'd never talked about it. She'd talked about it, I'd agreed to it, and somehow that became we. But I was different now. I'd rather do something smaller, I said. Silence on the other end. Emma wasn't used to me having preferences that conflicted with hers. Like what? Dinner? Just family? Maybe a few close friends? That's kind of boring, Liv. It's what I want. More silence. Then, okay, we can do both. Dinner for you, party for me, separate nights. It wasn't ideal, but it was more than old Olivia ever got. Okay. She didn't ask about my life, didn't ask about my work, didn't ask what I'd been doing for the past 7 years. She talked about her plans, her job, her apartment, her friends. She was thinking about getting back into dating. She'd been taking yoga. She was really into this new cafe that had amazing coffee. I listened and made appropriate sounds and realised I didn't miss this. Didn't miss being her audience. When she was done, she said, "We should share music for the party. You still have that massive playlist thing, right? I saw it mentioned in some article Mum sent me. Very impressive, by the way." My blood went cold. Not from fear, from recognition. This was the moment, the beginning of the betrayal. The first time around, I'd said yes. I'd given her access to my Spotify account, trusted her with something precious, and she'd deleted it like it was nothing. "No," I said. "What?" "I don't want to share my playlist." "Come on, Liv, don't be selfish. You have all this amazing music. It'll make the party more interesting. People would love it." Selfish. She'd called me selfish for wanting to keep something I'd spent 11 years building across 2 lifetimes, for having boundaries. "The playlist is public," I said quietly. "Anyone can follow it. But I'm not giving you access to my account, and I'm not curating for your party." "Why are you being difficult about this? It's just music." Just music. The same words. 11 years apart, the same fundamental misunderstanding of what it meant to me. "Because it's mine," I said, "and I don't want to share it." God, you're still so weird about this stuff. I don't know why you have to make everything so complicated. I'm not making it complicated. I'm making it clear. The answer is no. She made an exasperated sound. "Fine, whatever. I'll figure it out myself." She hung up frustrated. I sat in my Brooklyn apartment looking out at the city lights, feeling that old familiar tightness in my chest, but different now. Not from hurt, from relief, from power. I'd said no. I'd protected something that mattered to me. I'd chosen myself over keeping Emma happy. It felt like winning. The weeks passed. Emma planned her party. I wasn't involved, which was fine. I planned my dinner. She wasn't interested, which was also fine. We were living parallel lives that occasionally intersected, and I'd learned to be at peace with that. Then, 2 weeks before our birthday, something strange started happening. Emma called me. "Have you heard this song?" She hummed a melody. I recognised it immediately. An obscure track from an Icelandic post-rock band. One of my songs from my playlist. A song I'd written about in my podcast 3 years ago. "Where'd you hear it?" I asked carefully. "It was playing at this cafe I went to. So random, right? It's really good though. Very moody. Very me. Very me." She'd heard it once and claimed it. I discovered the artist when they had 200 listeners, had written about them, had put them on playlists that helped them grow their audience. And now, Emma heard them at a cafe and thought, very me. I said nothing. Over the next week, she called 3 more times. Each time, she'd heard another song from my collection, a jazz fusion piece at a bookstore, an experimental electronic track at a yoga studio, a haunting folk song in a boutique where she was shopping. "It's so weird," she said on the 4th call. "I keep finding all this interesting music lately. It's like the universe is curating for me, like I'm finally developing sophisticated taste." The universe, not me. not the years I'd spent discovering these artists, supporting them, writing about them, sharing their work on platforms that reached hundreds of thousands of people. The universe. I checked my analytics. My podcast had been growing steadily, but in the past 6 months, it had exploded. My playlist, which I'd made public years ago but never promoted aggressively, had been featured on dozens of music blogs. Major publications were writing articles about the new wave of intelligent music curation and citing my work as an example. The songs I'd collected, the artists I'd championed, were being discovered, shared, played in cafes and stores and studios across the country. My taste was becoming culture. Slowly, quietly, without fanfare. The way I'd always done everything. And Emma, who moved through that culture without ever looking at who created it, was encountering my influence everywhere without recognizing it. She was swimming in water I'd redirected, breathing air I'd changed, and thinking it was nature. You should check out my podcast, I said finally. I talk about music like this all the time. Oh, that's right, you have that music thing. What's it called again? Sound theory. Right. I keep meaning to listen to it. I will. I promise. After the party craziness is over. She never did. She never would. But she kept calling me about songs, excited about her discoveries, amazed at her suddenly sophisticated taste, convinced she was evolving into someone deeper and more interesting. I let her think it. The night of her party came. I didn't go. We'd agreed on separate celebrations, and I kept my boundaries. I had dinner with a few genuine friends instead, people who knew my work and valued my mind. My producer from the podcast, a colleague from the streaming service, a fellow curator I'd been friends with for years. We went to a quiet restaurant with excellent food and even better acoustics, and they played 3 songs from my playlist during dinner. We noticed. We smiled. We talked about music and meaning and the strange satisfaction of helping good art find its audience. It was quiet, meaningful, exactly what I wanted. Later, scrolling through my phone before bed, I saw Emma's Instagram stories. The party looked exactly like I remembered from my first life. Loud, bright, crowded. But the music was different. I could hear it in the background of her videos. Songs from my playlist. The DJ she'd hired, someone who followed music blogs and respected curation, had pulled from the same sources I'd been promoting for years. Emma was dancing to my songs again. But this time, she didn't know they were mine. She thought they were random discoveries, cosmic coincidences, evidence of her evolving taste. She was celebrating in a world I'd partially created, and she had no idea I was the architect. She posted a story. When the DJ plays everything you're obsessed with right now. Everything she was obsessed with right now. Everything I'd been obsessed with for years. Everything I'd worked to share with people who would appreciate it. She was the person who would appreciate it, just not in the way I'd hoped. Not with understanding. Not with recognition, just with consumption. But that was enough. It had to be. The next morning she called. She sounded tired. The party was good, she said. Everyone had fun, but honestly, it felt kind of hollow, like everyone was there, but I don't know. It didn't feel meaningful. I didn't say, I told you so. I didn't say anything. You know what was really weird? She continued. So much of the music reminded me of you. That serious, complicated stuff you like. But it was everywhere. The DJ said it's trending, all these obscure artists suddenly getting popular, getting written about in major publications. She paused. Did you have something to do with that? I smiled. She couldn't see it, but I smiled. I might have? How? I've been writing about music for years, Em, building playlists, making recommendations, consulting for streaming services on their algorithms. Some of them caught on. Silence. Long silence. I could hear her processing, trying to reconcile the sister she thought she knew, quiet, passive, background Olivia, with someone who'd built enough influence to shift musical taste. "You never told me," she said finally. "You never asked." More silence. "Can I read your blog? Listen to your podcast?" "They're public," I said. Always have been." After we hung up, I thought about Daniel. In my first life, I dated him for 2 years, watched him fall in love with Emma's reflection, died before I had to see how that betrayal fully unfolded. In this life, we'd met briefly at that party junior year. He'd tried to get my number. I'd said no thanks and walked away. I'd heard through mutual friends that he'd dated Emma for 6 months last year. It hadn't worked out. Apparently, she was too much for him. Too bright, too demanding, too accustomed to being the centre of attention. He'd wanted someone more grounded, more deep, someone like who he thought I was. But I wasn't interested in being his second choice or his fantasy of depth. I wasn't interested in being anyone's anything except my own. 6 months ago, he'd reached out to me, found me through my podcast, sent a carefully worded email about how much he'd learned from my work, how he'd always thought I was interesting, how he'd made mistakes in the past. He wanted to know if I'd be interested in getting coffee sometime. I deleted the email without responding. My birthday dinner was the next evening, just family, as promised. We met at a restaurant I chose, a quiet place with good food and better acoustics. They were playing one of my songs when we walked in. I noticed. Nobody else did. Emma was subdued. She kept looking at me like she was seeing me for the first time. She'd spent the morning listening to my podcast, she said. She'd read several of my blog posts. She was starting to understand what I actually did, what I'd built. Mum and Dad made conversation, asked about my work, my life. I answered honestly. I'd published a book on contemporary music theory last year. My podcast had 500,000 listeners. I consulted for one of the biggest streaming services in the world. I was working on a documentary about the mathematics of music. "That's wonderful, sweetheart," Mum said, but she sounded uncertain, like she didn't quite know how to be proud of accomplishments she didn't understand. Dad was more direct. "You've been busy building quite a career." "Yes," I said. "Why didn't you tell us about all this?" Mum asked. "We had no idea you were so successful." "I did tell you," I said gently. "Multiple times. You didn't hear me." That landed in the silence like a stone in water, ripples of discomfort spreading outward. Emma looked down at her plate. Our parents exchanged glances. "We're listening now," Mum said finally, and her voice was small. "I know," I said. And I did. They were listening now because my success had become undeniable, because the world had validated what they'd dismissed, because ignoring me had become impossible. But it was too late for their listening to change anything fundamental. I'd already learned to exist without it. I wasn't angry about it. Anger belonged to my first life, to old Olivia, who'd needed their approval and died hungry for it. This Olivia had fed herself, had built a table of her own and invited people who actually wanted to sit there, had created meaning from their absence rather than waiting for their presence. We ate dinner. It was pleasant enough, awkward, but pleasant. They asked questions about my work and I answered them. Emma was quiet, thoughtful, occasionally glancing at me with something that might have been admiration or might have been confusion or might have been grief for the sister she'd never really known. When we left, Emma walked with me to my car. The street was quiet, just the distant sound of traffic, and somewhere faintly music playing from an open window. "I read some of your blog tonight," she said, "before dinner, and I listened to 3 episodes of your podcast this morning." "And?" "It's really good, Liv. Like, really good. Smart and passionate and... I don't know. It sounds like you. The real you. The one I never paid attention to." Her voice cracked slightly. "I'm sorry I never paid attention before." I looked at her, really looked at her. My sister, my twin, my first life's antagonist and this life's stranger. She looked uncomfortable, maybe genuinely apologetic, maybe just confused by a world where I existed beyond her shadow, where I had substance and weight and influence she'd never suspected. "It's okay," I said. And it was. Not because she'd earned my forgiveness, but because I didn't need to hold on to hurt anymore. Forgiveness wasn't for her. It was for me. We're different people, Em. We like different things, want different things. That's okay. Is it? She looked uncertain, vulnerable in a way I'd never seen her. It feels like we're so far apart now, like we're strangers. We always were. You just didn't notice. She nodded slowly, processing that. Are we still sisters? Yes, I said. But maybe we're better at it with distance. Maybe we were never meant to be close. Maybe that's okay too. She hugged me. It was brief and awkward and not quite comfortable, but it was real. When she pulled back, her eyes were wet. Happy birthday, Liv. Happy birthday, Em. I drove home through familiar streets made strange by time and change, through neighbourhoods I'd known in another life, past landmarks that meant different things now. My playlist played through the car speakers, a new mix I'd created that morning, songs that felt like this moment, like closure and opening simultaneously. 25,000 songs now, a decade of curation across 2 lifetimes, an archive of attention, of care, of the particular way I understood the world through sound. When I got home to my Brooklyn apartment, I poured a glass of wine and stood at the window, looking out at the city. Lights everywhere, lives everywhere, stories I'd never know unfolding in windows I'd never look through. The world was so much bigger than my family, than Emma, than the small stage where I'd once performed my pain. I'd died once from being too small, from shrinking myself to fit into spaces that weren't made for me. I'd been reborn into a second chance, and I'd used it to become exactly as large as I needed to be. Not loud, not bright, not performed, but solid, real, influential in ways that mattered. Emma would keep encountering my influence. She'd hear my songs everywhere she went, not because I was haunting her, but because I'd changed the landscape. She'd walk through a culture I'd partially shaped, past storefronts playing music I'd championed, through cafes using playlists inspired by mine. She'd meet people who knew my work, read articles that cited my ideas, exist in a world where my taste had become texture. Maybe she'd eventually understand. Maybe she wouldn't. It didn't matter anymore. I wasn't living for her recognition. I wasn't even living in opposition to her. I was just living fully, completely on my own terms. I sat down at my laptop and added 3 new songs I'd discovered that week. 3 small additions to an endless archive. 3 more pieces of the world translated into sound, catalogued, preserved, shared with people who would understand them. The playlist played on. A song I'd found 4 years ago in this timeline, 7 years ago in my first life, before Emma had heard of the artist, before they'd blown up and become critically acclaimed, before their music played in cafes and boutiques and yoga studios. I'd been there first, quietly, in the background, paying attention while everyone else chased spectacle. That was my power. Not the spotlight, not the performance. The deep, patient work of listening, of cataloguing, of understanding, of building something meaningful in the silence while everyone else chased noise. I'd spent my first life being deleted. This life I was everywhere, in every algorithm I'd influenced, every playlist I'd inspired, every listener I'd guided toward music that mattered. I was in the background of culture itself, invisible and essential, like bass notes or breath. Emma could delete a playlist. She tried to take my music, but she couldn't delete me, couldn't erase my influence, couldn't stop the quiet, persistent work I'd done to change what people heard, and how they heard it. I opened my email. Messages from listeners, from musicians, from fellow curators. Someone in Norway thanking me for introducing them to an artist who changed their life. Someone in California asking for recommendations for their wedding. Someone in Australia writing their thesis on modern music curation and wanting to interview me. I'd built something bigger than myself, bigger than Emma, bigger than my family's understanding or validation. I'd built a cathedral of sound and people were finding their way to it, one song at a time. I closed my laptop. The apartment was quiet, peaceful, mine. Tomorrow I'd add more songs. Tomorrow I'd record another podcast episode. Tomorrow I'd continue. The work of paying attention, of translating that attention into something others could use, of being a bridge between beautiful music and people who needed it. But tonight, I simply existed, complete, self-contained, free. I'd been given an impossible gift, a second life, and I'd used it to become someone who didn't need saving, someone who saved herself, someone who understood that survival wasn't about being seen, but about seeing clearly, about knowing your worth regardless of who recognized it, about building something beautiful in the silence and letting it speak for itself. The music played on. My music, my collection, my world, made audible, made shareable, made meaningful. And it was enough. It was more than enough. It was everything I died for and everything I'd lived for, finally aligned, finally whole, finally mine.